This
voting on
conference will now be
Oklahoma Day
recorded.
next Thursday. So I'm going to turn it over to you. She does know how to get things started, doesn't she? Where is Mike? Get yourself down here, Michael. We're glad you came this morning. Some of these changes are very minimal in their impact. We're changing one page to another in the DRC, but we do have a few things that we will want you to look at. We have had issues that we were concerned about because we've had several people come and talk to us. Now, we don't go in and change things every time someone comes in, but if there's enough people coming and it's the same thing, then we want to look at it and see if there's some way to change it or make it more applicable to the people that we're working with today. Some of these rules are quite old and they become outdated and we don't even know why they exist as a board. We just know they're there. They have been there for quite a while. But if we can't find the logic, or if we feel they're seriously outdated, then we want to be available to you for you to come to us and say, you know, why is this way? And is there a possibility that we can look at it? So what Mike's going to discuss today are things that we have looked at, have changed, and we hope that they have some meaning for some of you who've been concerned with these particular issues. Thank you. Mike?
So we're gonna go with the design guidelines first.
Oh, no. No, wait, we're gonna
Bev, Bev's great.
Bev, you were in here. I saw you. Right. Our first speaker will be Bev Youngren, and she's going to talk to us in just a moment as she she finds where she's going and what she's doing. Okay.
I was thinking I was going after you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Bev Youngren, and Jan Chowden and I are representing Memory Park. For all of you guys that are new and may not really know about Memory Park, it's over off of Happy Trails on the way to the trash. You probably have been there, hopefully, and sat there and enjoyed the benefits. Just a brief history. It started in 1991 with an idea, and then it formulated into what we see today. Well, not really what we see today, but the beginning of that in 1994. And that was done by volunteers and a gentleman by the name of Joe Chodera and his group. Then we went on in 2006, a flag was added, if you see it on the ground with the rocks. However, when I came to Happy Trails, I didn't really recognize much of what was there because the rocks were just everywhere and the flag was very disrespectful. You kind of knew it was a flag. And we had a resident, actually a tenant by the name of Bill Burgess, who's retired military, and bless his soul, he came out every morning and picked those rocks and put them into the right spot and resprayed it. And now we have a flag that's patriotic and it's as it should be. Memory Park kind of fell through the cracks for a while because Happy Trails did not know who took care of it. It is not property of Happy Trails, it's property of the golf course. So therefore, it just kind of fell through the cracks for the maintenance. But that's all been changed, and we've got everything looking really good, and everything's trimmed. And we rededicated Memory Park in 2015. In 2017, Renee Vesco donated the military statue that you see, which is pretty cool. Sucker's heavy too, so we don't worry about anybody taking that away. And also, I want to acknowledge Jim Holbrook. I don't think he's in the audience, but most of you know him. He's been our Memory Park angel. He goes over there on a almost a daily basis and just takes care of whatever, whether it's the solar lights or whatever. And he's been our #1 volunteer to maintain Memory Park. So I just want to acknowledge him publicly because he's been doing this for a long time, and I understand this will be his last year here at Happy Trails. In 2020, a gentleman by the name of Dick Cosell, and are you here, Dick? Because I didn't see. Okay, in the blue shirt. I want to thank him because he came with a brick that he had made to honor some neighbors. And we didn't know what to really do with it because we hadn't created anything. So during the pandemic, I had big ideas that maybe I'd get on this, but it didn't work. So I promised him that that would be a priority to consider what we could do with memory bricks this year. So what we have, and I'll have it over on the table, is that we have bricks. There are 2 different sizes that you can purchase. This is going to be a fundraiser for Memory Park.
Conference will now be recorded.
Bricks will be sandblasted, and then they have an epoxy, white epoxy, so they'll last forever. And we will create what you call a memorial walkway to the flag. And we think this will be something very special. We've had a lot of people ask us, they say, I love Memory Park, but I really want something there to remember my loved one. And if I had a brick, that would just mean a lot to me. And so we decided to have a lot of benches in the park. So we decided as an option to do the bricks, which I think will work really well. We have Jill on board to help. And so we've got it all figured out how to do. The flyers are over here on the table along with the 2 bricks. And after the meeting, Jan and I will be there to answer any questions. Price, I'm going to let you look at that, but the prices are going to be reduced for the month of March because we'd really like to get this rolling. And then just for any of you that are going to be leaving, say in April, because I never really know the specific date, I will take photos of the brick that you're donating when we put it in, and I will send that to you so that you'll know exactly how it looks. So if any of you guys have any questions on any of this, please see Jan and I after the meeting. But I'm real excited, and I'm hoping that this will be as near and dear to your heart as it is to Jan and mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bev. Mike?
I've never done this before, so yes, just one small detail. Thank you for asking. The bricks, you will decide what you want on the brick. The small brick will have 3 lines. The 8x8 will have 5 lines, and you could put whatever you want. Now, this is not for your dogs and cats. This is for your humans. And there's going to be 2 symbols, a cross or a heart, that is considered part of the lettering should you decide. So let's just say it was John and Alice. You could say John and have a heart and then Alice. Or you could have John and then a cross and then Alice. Oh, how much? The bricks will be $75 for the 4x8 and $100 for the 8x8. And they're over on the table. They'll be more expensive down the line, but I was able to work with them that this is considered a fundraiser. Now, the last thing is that this money cannot go through activities because it is not a Happy Trail property. So the checks get to be written out to me. But have no fear because you'll put Memory Park on the remark and we'll take it from there. But that's the way we have to do it to keep everything going. So, okay, I'm sorry. I hope I've answered all questions. Thank you.
The next item that we're going to discuss this morning deals with the palm trees in your yards. When Happy Trails was started, there were certain amenities that were part of your package when you bought into Happy Trails. Having someone come in and trim your palm trees was something they did because they wanted to be helpful. It meant that whoever was working in DRC or whoever started this would go out and solicit vendors and how much they would charge to come into the park and take care of those trees. But it was not part of the actual amenities. It never has been. And in the last few years, we've had some real difficulties with companies that either didn't want to come in or when they came in, they didn't act real responsibly. And it's become a real burden for the DRC. And so we're getting ready to change that. And while I understand that most people would like having people come in and take care of it for them, it doesn't necessarily always work best. So I'm going to let Mike tell you a little bit about the change that's coming concerning the private property and the trees on your property. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Here to talk about some palm trees. I know a lot of folks are very aware of this program as we have a lot of palm trees throughout the resort. I mean, roughly somewhere in the 400 range for residential trees and approximately 200 or so of common area palm trees. So it's been a big deal to have this program go on throughout the years. You know, I've only been here for the last 3 years with our program, but I understand that this program has gone on, you know, long before I arrived here at Happy Trails. The company that did it for us, not this last year, but the year before last, which had been 2020, he had trimmed the trees for us for the last 7 or 8 years. We had some issues, of course, regarding, you know, scheduling and whatnot. And most folks will realize that even 2021 was even worse when it came into the palm tree pruning program. The difficulty that we have is finding a vendor that is capable of performing the amount of work we have here at Happy Trails with the quality that we're looking for. A little bit of insight on 2021, we had some damage to properties that was done by the palm tree pruning company. We had some properties that were missed, not maintained like they agreed to, and we're not getting response from this company now. That's kind of where we're at. That's the challenge we've had in 21. The board of directors, of course, is looking at that and trying to determine what we can do to remedy these issues from 2021. But it really put it in perspective for us that it's difficult because liability holds in the association's hands as well as the homeowners' hands when we do an agreement for a palm tree pruning program. So we kind of stand in a place where we say, well, we want to do something. We want to try to help the residents as much as we can. We understand there's a lot of situations where folks are traveling during the summer months, and the reality is that these palm trees need to be pruned during the summer when folks are not here. They seed approximately, you know, May, June area. And if the trees are trimmed too early, they will reseed. So that's kind of a major issue that we have. A lot of the folks are not in the resort at the time that the tree needs to be trimmed. So we've always taken into account that we try to help with that situation. That's ultimately evolved into the association managing a palm tree pruning company to come in and cut trees on private properties and manage the intake of the financial side, with checks being paid to the association and the association paying the palm tree pruning company. And what we've came to this year for 2022 is we'd like to bring a list of palm tree companies that are in our local area to our residents and say, these are some companies that are interested in doing palm tree pruning for the association. They're willing to work in here for the association. And ultimately, it's a homeowner's choice and responsibility to have the tree taken care of within a certain time frame. We understand there's going to be some flexibility because that time of year, landscaping is crucial. There's a lot of going on with weed control and storms and tree trimming. So we're thinking putting maybe a date of, say, August 1 or so to have the requirement of the tree being trimmed by such date. But ultimately, the change would be the homeowner would be responsible to maintain the tree, and it would be required that the palm tree be trimmed in the summer so we don't have any excessive flowering from the tree. You'll see these seed pods that come out on the palm trees. Most of them throughout the resort are Mexican fan palms, and they're probably the biggest contender of doing that seed pod that comes off of there. Your date palms are a little bit different. Some folks like to harvest the dates, and that's later on. But nonetheless, most of them are the Mexican fan palms, the big tall palm trees that you see all the way down the boulevard and Roy Rogers. That's the type of tree we're looking at. So that's kind of our point right now. We're not trying to get out of it per se. We're just trying to make it manageable, and we haven't found a company that's able to manage a project of this size. We think that it's going to be much more beneficial to bring multiple different companies in to work for residents to be able to handle more efficiently for a program of this size. We haven't really discussed prices from these palm tree companies as of right now, because a lot of it's going to depend on how much work they're going to get. If they're going to have, 3 trees in the resort, I would suspect that the price may differ if they have 100 trees in the resort. So it's just going to vary on which companies are being used in the area. And that's kind of the direction we were thinking of going. Do we have any questions from residents?
Here, I'll go.
Top quality was top quality was 20, oh, you got it, Mike. Top quality was 2021 and 2020 and prior was Total Care Ground Services. We had them previously and the price had changed, which wasn't a problem. We got past that. And in 2020, we had Top Quality out. And ultimately, we had some issues with the timeline that the trees were trimmed in. We ultimately got them all done eventually. And then after that such date, we tried to reach out to such company and tried to communicate with such company and didn't get a response for 2021, which led us to go over to Top Quality. We thought that was going to be a good situation. And unfortunately, we kind of learned our lesson. That wasn't a good situation. It was a highly rated company. It was advertised by CAI. So, I mean, they had good references online and whatnot, but it just didn't pan out the way that we were looking for. And ultimately, they didn't get our trees trimmed and completely finished until November. And now we still have lots that are not skinned that had paid to be skinned. So we're trying to manage that as of right now.
Here, Glenn.
Coming with the mic, Glenn. Well, the list that we have is not going to be a reference from Happy Trails. It's going to be a list of local companies that are able to perform, palm tree pruning program, or able to trim palm trees locally here. So there's a handful of companies, including AZ Palm Kings. This Gilberto, a lot of folks know Gilberto here in the resort. He does a lot of paver work. He's saying that he has a guy that's capable of trimming palm trees. He would, that would be one that we put on the list. But we're going to be adamant about we're not referring a company to do the palm tree program for residents this year. It's just going to be a matter of contacting these companies and determining if you would like to hire them privately.
You're going to hire them individually now?
Correct.
Alone?
Okay,
Can't you go back to the old system where we had to go by four?
1 second, Don. Let's go ahead, Glenn. Ask your question. We'll come back to you in a moment, Don.
okay, to trim the palm trees on the HOA property common grounds is paid by the association.
That is correct.
The ones that are on private property are paid by the individual owner.
Correct.
How about the removal of the palm tree?
On private
On
property
private property.
would be the responsibility of the homeowner.
Oh, no. Okay, thank you.
Do you have more questions here, Don? Microphone. I'm sure we have some more questions over here.
Has there been any thought to bringing this, since we have so many palm trees, to bring it inside and have a staff of Happy Trails people do this rather than going outside to other vendors?
I think that's a good question. Joe might be able to.
We did check into it and our insurance will not allow them to climb the trees. And if it's on private property, then our insurance will not cover. And the whole association is paying a landscaper to trim your palm tree per se. Yeah, but the ones on private property are not covered by our insurance, and our insurance will not cover if a person has to climb the tree versus a picker. Don beat you. Sorry.
First of all, we have to somehow we have to keep palm trees here in Happy Trails. It kind of means paradise to a lot of people. A lot of us like palm trees. I think most of us probably do. When you drive in the resort, it looks beautiful with all the palm trees and everything. Now, when you put the burden on us to hire the company, we're only one person talking to that company. We don't know if anybody else has talked to that company. How are we going to coordinate this? That would be crazy.
Coordinating in order to hire a company to do the palm tree
Well,
for
no,
you?
what I'm saying is, just like you made the point that if they do a lot more palm trees, they're going to do it probably cheaper because they're in here, boom, 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 go right down the line. But if we have to hire them all by ourselves, then the cost is going to be higher.
It may.
And we don't know what company other people are getting. So, I mean, shouldn't it be, we all say, okay, we want the palm tree trimmed, which ones we want, or everybody here that does it every year. I do it every year without question. I just pay in and that's it. We can still pay them ourselves. Doesn't have to go through you guys. But
Correct.
somehow you got to coordinate that.
Well, I agree. And I understand where you're coming from. It's kind of a double-edged sword here. The situation is really, really difficult, but perception on this situation we have right now. In 2021, we had Top Quality come in where the association brought the company in and the payment was made directly from the homeowner to the landscape company. However, when damage happens or when something's missed or something's not done properly, the homeowner is putting the responsibility on the association to manage the landscape company when something happened, because the agreement was ultimately between the landscape company and the association. They're going to bring an agreement saying, hey, you need to sign this saying, we're going to do so many palm trees for you. This is the liability X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Well, then that still ties Happy Trails into the palm tree program when this goes south. When this, it's not a matter of personally, I don't have an issue with the palm tree program. I know we have a lot of stuff going on, but we can't even, at this point, we don't even know who's going to, who could do it for us. And we know that Top Quality, the company that we used last, was not going to be a contender with how many issues we have going on currently still from the program we did in 21. And we didn't get any response from the other company in 2020. I've had a couple other landscape companies that have been interested but uninsured. So the association can't hire someone that doesn't have liability insurance. So it's a big problem. It's a big challenge.
What's going to happen is you're making it harder on the homeowner, and there are people here that's going to say, I'm not going to put up with it. I'm just going to cut the thing down and I'll be done with it. Well, that's not a good solution, I don't think. We want palm trees in here. That's part of paradise.
Yeah, and I appreciate the input, and that's why we're bringing it to the town meeting to have the open conversation. And ultimately, I think it will be something that the board would discuss next week at our board meeting. Maybe it'll go that route. I'm not sure. I'm not speaking for the board, but ultimately, I don't know what's going to happen with this situation.
Right now, what are the expectations of getting a palm tree done? Is it every year you expect them to be done and it's completely skinned, and then what's the ramifications if it's not done?
So the requirement is under our design guidelines. It's going to speak to general maintenance. It does not require the palm tree to be skinned. The bark on the tree would not have to be removed. That's kind of that area where if the bark gets to the point where it's kind of piling up on the base of the palm tree and falling off onto neighboring properties in monsoon season or whatnot, we can address that individually with the homeowner. But the trimming of the top of the palm tree is a requirement annually. It will flower every single summer, especially when we're talking about these Mexican fan palms. So that is a requirement that will be every single summer. Failure to comply and not have the tree trim may result in monetary penalty, which officially would be a $50 monetary penalty, and then continuing with a $100 monetary penalty per our rules and regulations.
Would it be possible to set up a date to when different companies could come in here and have like a palm tree cutting sign up day?
That's an idea.
Have you decided, Mike, on which company you're going to hire for Happy Trails palm trees?
No.
Not yet.
How does Sun City, Sun City West, Sun City Grand, Sunflower, how are the other associations around here handling this?
From my understanding, the other associations near us are, the association is responsible for all the vegetation on common area property, and the homeowner is responsible for all their private vegetation.
That's correct.
My concern is if we contract with a palm trimming business and we're back in Michigan and they have not come in by the date that is supposed to be done of getting the fine. When we first bought, we had no idea that, number one, that was our palm tree, and number two, knew nothing about trimming. So we were back home in Michigan and got a letter and had to pay the extra for this palm tree trimming that we knew nothing about. So number one, that would be a nice thing to include for information for new homeowners before they buy. I mean, I know they had to tell us about Loop Air Force Base flying over, no big deal, but this yearly expense, we didn't really appreciate it. And now it's even going to be harder because my concern is that, especially these days where companies are having a hard time finding employees, that just because we contact them, maybe we've already paid them and it doesn't get done. And are we going to get fined then?
Right. No, I understand. And that could be a possibility. We would, attempt to communicate with you guys as much as we possibly can when it comes down to the situation. And we know that, with everyone traveling or being out of Arizona and a lot of folks being out of Arizona in the summertime, communication is just going to be key. We're not, so militant that we're not willing to work with you. If there's a situation where we know that this company is backed up and they're on your list, they're going to be taken care of. We can add a note into your, onto your account and say, this is scheduled, this is planned, this has been paid for, and they're going to take care of this tree. It may not happen by August 1 exactly. We just wanted to give a general timeline of when we were hoping to have the trees done by. The catch here is that for some of the trees that are trimmed, if you trim too late, we have an absolute mess, and it's a hot button for a lot of residents that are here in the summertime because it's making a tremendous mess on neighboring properties, and they're blowing off their properties every day because of these seed pods. And so when we don't have trees that were, trees that weren't trimmed, someone that didn't sign up on the program, we're hearing from those residents daily. When are they going to have this tree taken care of? What's going to happen here, even if they didn't sign up on the program? So we try to get them all taken care of, but if you trim too early, you're still going to be in a situation where it's going to reseed again. So yeah, there's that challenge of timeline, and we're hopeful that with enough companies being able to come in here, they may be able to keep up with the quantity that we have here in the resort.
I want to have my palm tree removed, and if I do I need permission from your office first?
So the removal of the vegetation will not require a permit from the DRC. Any new installation of vegetation does require a permit.
Okay. Anybody else?
Has the DRC or the resort looked at that the resort trim all of the trees and then bill back to the owner?
Yes, and unfortunately, per our covenants and our CC&Rs, it will not permit us to bill a homeowner for vegetation on their private property. If we were a condominium or something of that nature, it would be very simple to have our governing documents state that you're going to be billed for. But if that's subject to change, The challenge is if our price is $55 this year, but it's $110 next year, that agreement has to be from the homeowner. You know, if that price is subject to change for who's trimming the palm tree, that would have to be something that would be in writing since it is private property.
Association put the trees there, the people didn't.
And I don't know the history behind the palm trees back 20 years ago.
Association put water systems in for them.
Have you given thought to,
One sec.
have you given thought to having getting a person to coordinate for the owners, the trimming of the trees, not the DRC, but just like we contact a private individual to look after our property when we're gone? Have you given thought to seeing if there's a person who would be willing to coordinate the trimming of the trees so that they would be there when they were trimmed and check to see whether there were any damage and dialogue with the owners? If the owner is 3,000 or 4,000 miles away, it's very, very difficult for them to stay on top of this issue, and putting it totally on their shoulders and finding them if they don't comply seems to be a very rough way to go. And I would say that many people are going to remove their palm trees, and I would hate to see that happen.
And ultimately, whatever the board and the association chooses to do, I support 100%. I just trying to brainstorm the situation, and I want to come to a conclusion on what's going to work best for the resort.
I got a couple items. I've been involved in DRC and in the board for the last 6, 7, 8 years. A lot of the problems with palm tree trimming is the lack of correspondence with DRC in regards to getting them done, having them done, scheduling. They spend hundreds of hours on this every year trying to get the thing done with talking to the homeowners.
Does the park have any rules on who we hire? For instance, I saw somebody climbing up a tree with a rope.
No, not on private property. There's not a requirement. You don't have to use a vendor that's from our vendor list. It could be anyone that you wish to hire on your private property.
And the method that he trims them, you have no rules on.
No, I mean, no, ultimately, no.
Thank you.
I have a concern that we may have some dual standards. You know, we're talking about liability and insurance. As a resort does it, it will be insured. We got some issues about liability, but I don't think the resort has the ability to subrogate the liability or the responsibility for this endeavor to have private parties do it. I think we're asking for trouble.
Anybody else?
If we don't have any more questions, just remember, folks, this is an amenity that we have given and maybe is becoming too cumbersome. I do like the idea that was given about having someone come in and have a sign-up day. And again, if there's somebody that would like to work with the board in coordinating, they can let us know. And that's another possibility we could do. If you have a good solution, please share it with us. We really want to hear from you. We can only do what we know. And if you know something that we don't, please share it. At this time, we're going to look at the DRC committee agenda, not agenda, but the rules and regulations, the design guidelines. Get the title right here. And Mike is going to go through this and just tell you and show you kind of what we have done to try to update it to meet the things that have been of concern to you as a homeowner. Mike?
Design guidelines. We did a revision in the summer of 2020 and got a lot of stuff cleaned up on the design guidelines. This is, you know, the design guidelines are going to cover most of the architectural things in the resort. It doesn't get into the rules and regulations, doesn't, include the CCNRs. It's just its own document here. And we did do this, like I said, in 20, and we got a lot of good things out of that revision in 2020. But what we found is there was a couple little hiccups that maybe weren't addressed or were maybe changed a little too prematurely in 2020. So we're going to bring those to the table. I'm going to go through each individual page that has had a revision on it. There's not very many, so it should be pretty quick, and I will explain what such revision was, and we'll go from there. And then at the end, we'll take some questions. All right. I'm going to start off on page 1. And it's a real simple revision, and it is ultimately changing a page number to meet our new CCNRs. Page number had to change, section 10, CCNR section 10.1. So that's just a formality. Since our CCNRs were revised, page number changed, so we're just matching our current CCNRs. We also, the DRC committee has decided to change the quorum for the DRC committee. Previously speaking, the DRC committee quorum consisted of 2 members. We'd like to, we have a total of 5 DRC members, and we'd like to change that from 2 members to 3 members, just so it makes sense if we have a majority vote from our committee. Most of the time we have all the committee there. There's usually all 5 of them, and even virtually during the summertime if need be. So it's pretty solid, but just in case, we figured we might as well address it while we're here. We're gonna move on to page 4. Page 4, another change for our CCNRs, which is changing 11.28. So once again, just a page change to address with the CCNRs. Same thing on page 5, trash containers referring to CCNRs paragraph 11.13. Another minimal change. On page 6, once again, CCNRs section 9.1 and section 11.27. Items not approved. Artificial turf, once again, referring to the CCNRs paragraph 13. And we'll get to our first revision of the design guidelines on page 8. Page 8 at first is going to speak to shade and privacy panels. I'm sorry, page 7, my apologies. Page 7, first off, shade privacy panels. So what we're adding into the design guidelines on our shade privacy panels speaks to must not extend beyond property setback lines in any direction. Only pre-finished louvered aluminum, horizontal aluminum tubing spaced at 1 inch vinyl lattice panels or Lexan are permitted. The area that we added was the DRC may consider other materials such as solid panels, i.e. stucco, hardy board, siding to match existing structures. All applications must be approved by the DRC. Panels may extend to the underside of the awning if freestanding. Maximum of 6 feet. Panels must not form a complete enclosure. The reason for this was generally based on a lot of our solid stucco walls that we see throughout the resort. We have gone that route to approve those stucco walls for the last couple of years. Basically very commonly off the back of a casita, existing shed where the outdoor kitchen is for cabinetry. This is going to go hand in hand with the rest of the privacy panels, not to make a complete enclosure, but this would ultimately allow for a solid wall versus a louvered wall or aluminum louvered. We have confirmed with the city of Surprise that it is not requiring our building permit, as it is going to be deemed aesthetic wall. Next thing on page 7 is going to be our flagpoles, and this was kind of a hot button. A little bit of insight real quick. We have rewrote it. Maximum height of flagpole is limited to 25 feet for sections 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. And the maximum height of flagpole in section 2, the villas, is limited to 15 feet. Location and installation must be approved by DRC. This is essentially exactly what it was prior to 2020 when we changed it to not exceed the height of the dwelling. When we did that, it wasn't malicious in any way, shape, or form. We were trying to meet our state statutes, and our state statute said that we can allow the flagpole to be the same height as the dwelling, X, Y, and Z. Well, when we did that, we realized it was not ideal. We had a lot of feedback from the residents saying if our flagpole was only the height of the dwelling, we're going to get a lot of the situations where the flag's touching the home, it's damaging the flag, and it's not going to be cost effective for the location. And we really didn't see a problem with it being 25 feet. So we had requested that it go back to 25 feet. Then we will move on here to page 10. Oh, did I miss it here?
Not on the back.
Where am I? No, did you? There it is. They have different pages.
I have nothing to add. And you didn't read this one.
All righty, we will continue on to utility procedures, which is including mini split air conditioning units. So we wrote it as exception: mini split AC units defined as compact air conditioning units may be installed on the rear of the structure or within the interior side of the property. Units may be wall mounted given the DRC finds that such request would not become a nuisance to any neighboring property and or visually impact the aesthetics of the resort. All applications require DRC approval. The addition of this paragraph is strictly for mini split air conditioning units. On each one. Mini split air conditioning units. So this is becoming more popular in the resort. These little briefcase kind of coolers that you see, very common. They're very affordable and they're very efficient comparatively to these older heat pumps and whatnot. So we wanted to include these into our design guidelines as they are growing in popularity. And we've had a lot of requests for them to be in other locations other than the rear of the property. Our current regulations speak to the air conditioning unit to be in the rear setback. And these smaller units they require less line to be ran for them. So coolant lines and whatnot, they need to be closer to the property. They could be on the rear of the existing structure, or we're requesting that they be on the interior side of the lot, not facing a neighboring property on the outside. They're very quiet, they're very efficient. However, we figure that it's still a good idea to have them on the interior side versus facing a neighboring property on the outside. Do we have questions on the air conditionings or the few I had before this? I'm sorry I didn't ask questions. Figure we ought to bring questions up. All righty, we'll continue on then. Our next revision is going to be, this is kind of one that's been talked about quite a time. Coming to page 12, if I'm 15.
Good morning, Mike. I just have a question on these split airs. I thought the city, because the fire department did not allow things like this in the side yard setback because they've got to be mounted, I believe, about 14 inches from the house. And so that only gives you a few inches to get by. And also, they are not necessarily quiet. So I don't understand if you're.
Are you meaning on the side setback?
Correct.
So we're meaning on the interior side of the property, which if you're, say, if you had an Arizona room and you have your RV in the RV port, we're talking in between the RV and the structure.
What if I don't have an RV?
So and you have an Arizona room and a park model per se?
I'm just throwing it out.
Well, then it would be in the rear of the property. If it's not the interior side of the property, it would then be the rear of the property that you'd be required to place that air conditioning unit, just like what's existing in our design guidelines now. We're just prohibiting it being on the outside setback of the property in between properties.
So the noise will be on me and not on my neighbor.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't see any mounting requirements on here and like pad mounting or anything like that. I know one of the first ones installed in the resort is in a visible area and it was set on a piece of concrete behind the home. And now over a couple of years, it's starting to slide across that piece of concrete. They need to be bolted down.
Okay. It's good input. Thank you.
Another question, when you say putting them on an interior wall, does that mean it could go on the park model where it has a parking lot, a parking space between there and your property line?
Say if you're facing the lot from the street side, you have a park model, the left-hand side of the home. Yes.
Left-hand side of the home is a parking strip.
Correct.
You could go between the parking strip and the house.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're good on questions there. I'm sure we will have more on the next. Next discussion is going to be awning height. We've brought this up on multiple occasions. It's been brought up in previous town meetings, and it's been pretty deep discussion. The design review committee has come to the consensus that they would like to raise the height of the awning so long that the board agrees here. Our previous regulation speaks to a maximum height of 14 feet 6 inches. Challenge there is that grade plays a factor into a lot of these awning heights. If the maximum height is 14 feet 6 inches, we figure we may have about a foot of run in the awning. So the lowest point of the awning may be 13.6 or even lower on a lot of these properties. So there are some issues with recreational vehicles being backed onto a property and not being tall enough to get under, especially a lot of these newer fifth wheels and whatnot, not being too tall to get under these existing awnings. So they would like to propose a change to the awning height to be from 14 feet 6 inches to 15 feet 6 inches. Do we have any particular questions on that?
Mike Perry's first.
Mike Perry, lot 1790. You realize that a lot of these newer motorhomes from within the last 10 years, most of them are based at 13'6". Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And the circulation of the air conditioning unit on that need more than a foot. So what happens when you build one of these awnings and the roof pan takes up about 6 inches and the substructure takes up another 8 to 10 inches. So you lose over a foot of clearance just in the building of the construction of the awning. So my awning is 14'6". Currently my coach is only 12'8", but you can't hardly get up in between the top of the coach. So we create an issue where those air conditioners don't breathe.
Right.
It burns them up.
Right, and we've had a lot of discussion on what height to go. The feedback from the City Surprise is that there's not a stipulation as long as it is engineered. You know, that you could have a 17-foot tall awning, technically speaking, per the city's regulations. There's not a there's not a regulation on their behalf as long as that awning can be engineered. So that was the committee's decision, or their thought was that 15'6" would accommodate most of the situations. But I hear where you're coming from there.
Beverly Youngren, 2371. In referring to the awning covering, I know you're talking about the height, but in looking at that whole section, I don't see anything on colors. And you and I have talked about this, and it concerns me because we do have one unit with the dark brown. And personally, I think if that's dotted through the resort, it's not acceptable, and I don't think it's desirable to the resort. So is color to be, or should color be in here somewhere? I see that there's item number 7, but nothing says anything on restrictions, and you did approve that brown one. And I'm just concerned that that is not in the best interest of the resort to have multicolored units throughout the lots.
I understand. And that is, you're right. There's not a stipulation on the awning color. It's not written.
There should be.
Fair enough.
Is there going to, I mean, are you going to have a discussion on this?
I mean, we can absolutely bring it to the committee level and have a discussion on the material colors for the awning. Absolutely.
I did bring it to the committee. I brought it to you.
And at that time, the committee didn't feel like it was appropriate to change as they approved the brown color that was permitted on the lot we're speaking of right now.
I think the residents might disagree with you at this point. So we bring it back up to you again.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Isn't that awning more than 15 feet?
No.
Yeah, Mike, Terry Walters, lot 497. Back in the early 2000s, the city had a heartbreak here with our 14.5-foot awnings because of illegal living in those units. And hence the 17-footer came out. Has the city been approached with raising these to 17 foot? And probably the additional problems you're going to have now of people occupying. And we did have regulations about one roof line. And I don't know if that's been disappeared through your previous changes, but so what happens if you have a 14.6 and all of a sudden now you have a bump in now, so you don't have your one roof line that you normally were requiring, and the legalities of the city.
Right. So to start there with the legalities of the city, we have addressed the city of Surprise regarding the height. And you know, when we brought it up initially, we wanted to ask the city of Surprise what their regulation was. And their answer was strictly, if it's legally engineered and stamped and approved, that there can be the height that was submitted for. So 17 foot is plausible, absolutely, per the city's regulation. And when it comes down to the roof line, I don't know how far back in the existing design guidelines that goes, but hello, oh, there it is. From my understanding of the design guidelines, since I've been here at Happy Trails, I don't recall there's stipulation that speaks to one continuous roof line, as we've had a lot of awnings throughout the resort that were raised on just the RV port side of the lot to accommodate the height of a recreational vehicle. Go ahead, sir.
I got a question. What about the engineering of the footings on these awnings? Because some of them have been raised once already. If you're going to raise them again, are they going to be saying, hey, you're going to have to go in and put that one, a big footing in versus what some of the existing footings are?
That's a very good possibility. That's a very good possibility. And the city's kind of cracking down on a lot of those things. It's kind of a challenge, even relocation of awning posts within the resort. In previous years, it was kind of nonchalant. We'd move an awning post here and move an awning post there to accommodate a slide out. And now what we're understanding from the city is that's going to require re-engineering of an existing awning. And they're going to require at that point in time that it meet current codes with current footers. And, you know, I understand that can be a challenge, but we want to make sure that it's safe, and we're really not the authoritative figure to tell you if that awning is safe or not. That's going to be the city of Surprise. So we will refer to the city and make sure that they're, you know, that we're following through with what they're requiring from us. We're not an entity that is really going to enforce on, you know, is that structurally sound? I'm no engineer. I can't deem that your structure is structurally sound, but And with the city being able to do that, we're gonna push towards the city of Surprise for approval. And if they deem that it doesn't require engineering, that's one thing. But if it does, we're gonna enforce that it receive engineering before any improvements done. All righty, I don't see any more questions. We will continue on here. With the awning height changes, we have, it's been brought to our attention on the next page, or 2 pages over, we'll see that it will ultimately affect the height of the storage structure. Storage structure per our regulations is stipulated to be built to the underneath side of the awning. So if our regulation changes for our awning height to 15 feet 6 inches, we either have to allow a structure to be a foot lower than the new awning with the, say, a shed, or we require that the structure be built up to 15 feet 6 inches. Committee has discussed and ultimately thought it was best to bring the structure height up to 15 feet 6 inches. It will still not allow for habitable upstairs. That space here at 15 feet 6 inches will not be habitable for that storage structure. Even if there is a space, we know that there's a lot of situations throughout the resort that space may or may not be utilized. It's kind of a challenge here. It's really challenged to enforce such subject. But ultimately that upper space will be strictly for storage. What it's utilized by with a private property owner is ultimately their decision. But it would not be habitable, the space. That upstairs would not be habitable. Do we have questions on the storage structure height? Seeing none, we will continue on. Next page, we'll discuss the material around a fifth wheel. This was kind of just brought to us here recently, as we had a request or had a handful of requests for skirting on a fifth wheel. You'll see very commonly on our destination homes or cottages, they're commonly referred to, that a lot of times they're hard skirted. They're more of a permanent kind of recreational vehicle, and they're referred to in our regulations as PMRVs. So that's a little bit different. However, we had a lot of requests recently for more of a permanent style, more or less, skirting to a fifth wheel. Our regulations do indeed speak to no manufactured home, travel trailer, fifth wheel shall be permanently installed on a lot, i.e. set on jacks or blocks. We're not planning for the recreational vehicle to ultimately stay forever. However, there's a lot of folks that would like to do a more decorative skirting. Previously speaking, our design guidelines only allowed for vinyl and fabric type material on a fifth wheel skirting to be attached with snaps or Velcro. So the request recently has been for more of like a T111 kind of skirting where it's framed and skirted around the bottom side of a fifth wheel. So what has been written is a softer pliable vinyl or fabric type fastened to the RV with Velcro snaps or solid siding will be permitted for RV skirting. See skirting material, page 13, item 8, siding skirting material. DRC approval is required, which speaks to the different style matching the existing unit. X, Y, and Z. So there would still be some aesthetic things that would go into that. Of course, if the existing structure was this color, it would match that color or match the recreational vehicle on the lot. But this would ultimately allow for folks with a fifth wheel to hard skirt the underside. Do we have questions on this topic? Okie doke. We will continue on here to, I have page 19, but I know this is a little bit different as we opened it up on a different page. Why it's done that, I don't know. All right, it's going to speak to driveway and concrete. This is strictly a section in the design guidelines that refers to our country club homes, section 7. We've had kind of an issue with this as we started to enforce some parking on landscaping. Per the regulations and the design guidelines, it strictly spoke to all, in section 7 specifically, it spoke to all parking areas being concrete. A lot of that section 7, where they're all manufactured homes over there, there's no recreational vehicles, and a lot of those spaces utilize a parking space in front of the home. It's very, very common, as if it's either pavers or it's gravel and they're parking a golf cart there or they're parking a car there. The majority of that section has an additional car parked in an area that is not concrete. And the issue that we've seen is it's really only referring to section 7. The rest of the resort doesn't require that it have concrete parking. Recreational areas that are not concrete, they may still be gravel at that point in time. And to meet the rest of the design guidelines the committee had discussed and ultimately would like to remove the language that speaks to it being concrete. We did keep, I will read this paragraph here. The area under the carport awning shall be concrete. That will maintain. All of them have developed, and I believe there's no lots over there that still need to be developed. So that's kind of, already existing. The use of asphalt as paving material on any lot is prohibited. No lot improvement shall encroach upon the minimum carport requirement or any way interfere with access to the carport. So it's the exact same thing in the design guidelines as what was existing, just removing that all parking areas shall be concrete. Do we have questions on this paragraph here? No, in setbacks. So the setbacks are still going to be above here. See Exhibit C for typical layout and setback requirements. So the setback requirements will stand. That there's still certain easements that are maintained for utilities, and those are not designated parking areas. We do not permit concrete over water lines. Absolutely not. We do permit, however, we do permit pavers into the setbacks. And when every permit that is submitted for pavers in a setback, it's stated that the homeowner is responsible for reinstallation of pavers if the resort or private company has to remove them for access to utilities. Any other questions there? All righty, we will continue on here. Yeah, yes, sir.
Could you repeat what you just said about concrete over water lines?
Concrete over water lines and in setbacks, referring to setbacks.
In setbacks?
Correct.
Because my water line isn't in the setback.
Correct. In section 6, that water line runs 14 feet off the back of that wall there, and most of those properties are covering the main water line. Correct.
So I would not be responsible because it's not in the setback. It would be, if that water line has to be, it would be whatever servicing company.
My understanding is EPCOR is responsible for that main water line that runs along the back of that property there. Now, you and I have talked in occasions before of what would happen if that water line broke under your house. That's a challenge, and I don't know the exact answer to that. I mean, I know EPCOR will be responsible for the main line, but if they dig 5 feet under your house and it ultimately affects your foundation, I don't know exactly which direction that would go. But we're all hoping that doesn't happen. So we're going to move on here to another section that is referring strictly to the villas. And this section, design guidelines, villas lots 2106 through 2234. This section is referring to concrete and pavers. So I'll go ahead and start with reading the paragraph. Additional pavers may be placed up to property lines. No encroachment of pavers on common area property will be permitted. Owner will be responsible for reinstallation of additional pavers if resort must access utilities. Concrete will only be permitted where it's existed previously. Any existing additions shall be grandfathered. So this is let's see if this one works any better. All righty. So this is referring to some changes here. Not a whole lot of changes for the villas, but fairly minimal. talking about where exactly pavers can be located on villa properties, clarifying the difference between private property and common area property, and talking about concrete. The exact reason for the concrete change was directly due to the fact of our water complications. There's a lot of water lines that run throughout that villa area that are in somewhat strange areas, locations, and they may run under existing structures and concrete and whatnot, trying to prevent any major challenges with location of concrete. So we're more or less sticking to pavers, which is most commonly what folks are going with. The pavers being able to remove them, and even the appearance of them is very nice. So I don't think it's a big issue per se. It's just to try to look into the future and protect us for the future, not having to cut concrete and dig up concrete and jackhammer concrete to get to water lines, as it's subject to have problems with our waters as we've all experienced in a lot of locations throughout the resort. We also clarified the paragraph that's referring to location of pavers. So previously spoke to additional concrete or pavers may be placed to within 3 feet of the property line where that property line adjoins another villa property. Well, that's incredibly confusing for the villas, due to the fact that the locations of each individual villa and where common area falls in between each individual villa, where the property ends and begins. We figured it would be easier to define that pavers could be brought out to the property, and especially because the majority of the locations around the villas have done so already. So we've kind of, moved ahead of the documentation on that end. So do we have any questions on that paragraph? All righty, we'll move along there. I think we're about done. Pretty close. A couple other changes that I do have here that are just going to go along with the awning height. We will see it being changed to 15 feet 6 inches on some of our exhibits, if I'm not mistaken. We'll get through the ranch, HUD manufactured homes. This is going to be referring to HUD manufacturers. It refers to building not exceeding a certain height, talking about the structure, which we already addressed further up in the design guidelines as we're changing them from 14.6 to 15.6. Awning height for recreational vehicle, 15.6, from 14.6. So just once again, attaching to that exhibit. Moving further on to our exhibits, we've modified our numbers on the exhibits as well to address 15.6 awning height on each of these exhibits. And that will be all. Do we have any particular questions that were possibly missed?
Yeah, I knew you'd do that to me. Hi, this is Beverly Youngren, 2371. I'd like to go back to page 15, item 2A. I see there isn't any red changes there, but what I'm concerned about, this is the only section I see where it refers to corner lots, is that if you're going to give a variance, because you, DRC, give the variance for a corner lot for a park model, it seems to me that it's only fair that the adjoining homeowner should be notified on that, because that definitely impacts them. And this did not happen on the one that you and I talked about. And I suggest that in the future, I don't know how many corner lots we're talking about, but if I bought a piece of property, the second lot in, and I came back and found out that there's a park model where I thought that it was going to be open space, I wouldn't be very happy. So I really think that it's proper that you notify the adjoining property owners who are definitely impacted by this so that you can get their opinion and at least let them know. And I'm sorry, but that did not happen in the one that we've talked about, but I'd like to see that avoided in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And we definitely have learned a lot from that exact situation. We've done that quite a few times with what we're referring to as a reversal of a manufactured home on a corner lot due to the geography of the lot, it not fitting properly on the right-hand side of the property. So the committee has made accommodations in the past on a handful of lots to reverse the manufactured home to sit in the area that, say, such Arizona room would be built. Now, it still prevents a recreational vehicle being on the lot with the manufactured home, but due to the geography of the lot and how it's laid out and the certain setbacks we have allowed it. Like we said, we learned a lot from this. We see that it changes the aesthetics in a lot of cases, understanding what the future is going to be with a structure and an awning and et cetera, all the good things like that, and location of patio space for a neighboring property and where an air conditioning sits versus what it would have been on the right-hand side of the lot. So we've learned a lot there. And Bev has talked with us a lot about that. And we agree that we do need to do our due diligence to really look into that if that is brought to the table moving forward, looking into the future of what this is going to turn into, what this is going to be, and who this is going to affect. And the committee is all on the same page there.
Ron, I'll be there in a minute.
Bill Powell, lot 440. Mike, on Exhibit I, we've had a lot of discussion with BG&M about no construction materials into our dumpsters. I don't see that in I. As long as they're putting things together, you probably ought to have one in there.
For dumping material. Okay, thank you, Bill.
Mike, looking at the diagram that you got up there on the screen now, have you given any thought to reviewing and approving the transition between the structure and the awning? In other words, looking at the different heights of the roofs, have you looked at having to submit those for approval by the DRC?
So I think it really depends on, you're meaning like if you had an existing structure and you wanted to raise your awning there, how exactly that would work. I think it ultimately is going to depend on how the awning is built and how the existing structure is built and how that's going to exactly work. Because, when we look into this, if you're raising an awning that is gabled, say over an entire lot, a lot of these awnings are covering existing Arizona room structures, homes. So if the entire awning is raised up, there's going to be a lot of changes that have to happen to the Arizona room to accommodate that being then built up. I know in some cases that's the roof of the existing Arizona room. There's drop ceilings and insulation. That could be a challenge. In some cases, the roof lines are separated. So the RV port side is one awning, and then there's an existing awning over, say, an existing Arizona room. It just depends on scenario by scenario. It's hard to imagine of all the different things that we're going to see with this situation. The city is going to have to be involved in what's going to work architecturally, engineering wise, and we're going to have to look at how that is aesthetically going to impact the lot. Absolutely. Yes. And we feel at 15.6 that even if the right-hand side of the lot is raised a foot higher than the left-hand side of the lot, aesthetically, it's not going to impact the resort in a negative way.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great day. Thank you.